But first, check this out. This is mind-blowing. And I wonder if you know this too, Cassandra. Yesterday, the ATF tweeted, "We remember the fallen agents, Conway LeBleu, Special Agent Todd McKeon, Special Agent Robert Williams, Special Agent Steve Willis, who made the ultimate sacrifice trying to execute a search warrant. Learn more. Remember Waco, February 28th, 1993. Now, Cassandra, that tweet triggers you, right?
I am taking deep breaths over here.
Wait.
You reading it got me mad all over again. All right.
Did you know that in 2020, they tweeted the same thing?
Yeah, and I think I flipped out last year.
Yeah, every year.
Oh, wait. And you know the year before that, they tweeted the same thing?
Yeah, so ever since I made my Twitter account, I think in 2013 or something, every single year on Waco, I've gone into like long thread rant crazy person because I've been obsessed with Waco since I was little. I remember seeing it on the news. I think I was like 8 years old, and it was horrifying.
So break down what happened for everybody who's not super familiar.
Our government murdered our kids, basically. No, what actually happened was the Branch Davidians were living in a compound in Waco, Texas, obviously, and ATF and FBI had just flubbed massively a raid on Ruby Ridge. And they shot a woman who was holding her 10-month-old baby, their 14-year-old son, while trying to like stake out and arrest this guy. And so everybody was really pissed off about it. Everybody was like enraged, and ATF looked bad, FBI looked bad. People were really angry at them. So they were like, let's get a win. Let's go and save these kids from this bad, evil cult. And so David Koresh, the leader of the Branch Davidians, he would jog into town every day. He was close to the local sheriff. The people there were all, easily accessible, friendly with the community. The sheriff loved him. They called him when they were getting raided. But they wanted to make a big spectacle about arresting David Koresh because he had some illegal gun parts. They sold stuff at gun shows. It was, whatever.
Gun control.
Yeah. So U.S. government gun control is really scary. So basically what happened is on February 28th, 1993, they went and they were going to go serve a warrant, but they wanted it to be flashy. They wanted to have a big blowout. And so they invited the local news to come. Well, the local news driver got lost, and he asked a USPS driver how to get to the Mount Caramel, which was the Branch Davidian compound. And that guy happened to be a Branch Davidian. So he warned everybody who was back at the compound that something was going wrong and something weird was happening. So they all got ready, and they didn't come out. And they weren't going to come out. And so ATF breached the top window. There's a very famous video of them going up on a ladder, and a shootout took place inside. Some members of the ATF were killed. And they retreated, and a standoff ensued for 51 days where they were torturing the people inside. There were, I think, 27 women, 25 children who died. But for 51 days, they tortured these people. They would play sounds of rabbits being slaughtered, which is a horrific sound, like really loud through the speakers. They wouldn't give them milk. They turned off the electricity. There were a lot of babies in there, and they couldn't eat. So they made a deal to give them milk, but then they put like recording devices in it. It was just really bad. They did things there that would be considered a war crime if we did it in another nation. And then ultimately in April, it culminated with a CS gas attack. They went and they told Janet Reno that they believed that David Koresh was beating babies and raping babies, none of which was true. He had married a 14-year-old, but that was legal in Texas at the time. I personally disagree with that, as most people would, but it was legal. And so none of this was true. They admitted like 5 months after the siege that this wasn't true. But because they told her that babies were being like beaten, she was like, okay, go in with CS gas. And the FBI, the few sympathetic negotiators were like, they're not going to have gas masks for kids. And, the FBI were like, well, they'll have to come out faster then. So on the final day, they started piercing the building with tanks and shooting CS gas in, which by this point the government knew was flammable. We had seen the MOVE bombing and several other raids that ended up turning buildings into bombs because, you're putting gas into a building and breaking it apart. And they didn't have the fire department there, so the building caught fire. There's a debate if it was the ATF that started the fire or if it was the Branch Davidians. But either way, they did not have the fire department there to stop it. And so the women and children went and hid in a half-buried bus. And because the tanks were knocking down the building, the door to get out got barricaded. And so they shot tear gas into where the women and children were. And they died. They suffocated. The whole building went up in an inferno. Only a few people made it out. It's one of the greatest American tragedies, in my opinion.
That's heinous.
Sorry, that was really long.
No, that's
and
great.
I'm sure there's a whole bunch. That was the quick version. That was a few minutes.
Yeah.
And then every year, the ATF on Twitter commemorates the fallen servicemen over what was probably one of the most horrific atrocities.
And
in
they
American
never
history.
say anything about the women or children or men who were killed in there. But you know what the Branch Davidians do? Every year they have a memorial at Mount Carmel, and they also remember the ATF who died.
Wow.
Along with their own people. The ATF doesn't do that.
I mean, I feel for the ATF, the families of these men who lost their lives.
Sure.
But we clearly know who was in the wrong on this one.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sad when I hear about war and I hear any like people, and I don't want anyone to die. You know what I mean? It's
My issue is that they only remember the ATF people. There were 27 children in there, 2 unborn babies.
Yep.
And they killed them. Whether Koresh started the fire or not, which I personally don't believe, but that's their theory. Even if that's true, they were shooting CS gas into a building, did not have the fire department on standby, knowing that it starts fires. And they could have arrested him anytime he jogged into town, and they didn't because they wanted to show for the cameras.
Right.
This was all on them. And they don't even memorialize the babies that they killed. It infuriates
Well, they'd have to
me.
admit
I'm
fault to
sorry.
them. They'd have to admit that they killed these children.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is even outside of fire, you don't fire CS gas into a closed building because it displaces oxygen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was in Turkey, and there was a parking garage. This was during Gezi Park. And they were very liberally using tear gas, as it were. Just like there was so much tear gas on the ground, you were walking and kicking cans out of the way. And I remember seeing a bunch of the activists running into a tunnel. And then when the police fired tear gas into it, the next thing we saw was a bunch of people dragging bodies out. As soon as that gas filled the whole space up, there was no air anymore. People were just dropping to the ground. So what did the ATF think was going to happen if they started firing tear gas into a closed building?
Well, they claim that it would make the women want to protect their children and run out with their babies. But, they had been terrorizing these people for 51 days. Why would they trust them to leave the building?
Yeah.
If I
and a
was them,
shootout,
I
too.
would have thought they were going to kill me.
They
So
were, and they did.
yeah.
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 So I was talking to somebody about this on the anniversary, and they were like, well, that sounds like it was handled, less than responsibly. I was like, yeah. And I was like, this is worse than war, because this is the government of your own country taking you out. I was like, I admittedly, that was the first time I had looked into it, was yesterday on the anniversary. And I was horrified. I found pictures. I saw like the fireball, the charred remains. Yeah. And I sent that picture, and I was like, I mean, look at this. You can tell me what you want.
The
but
government bulldozed that whole site like a week later, too.
Wow.
They didn't even go and collect all the evidence. They were like, let's just get rid of this. Quite literally.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
My dad's from Waco.
I get infuriated.
yeah.
The dad's of my
family's from
family
there.
is from Waco, so there's nothing really related to that because I think they left well before 1993.
Yeah.
But apparently there was a lot of stories of people who knew people and how crazy it was.
Well,
That's nuts.
David Thibodeau, who's one of the people who escaped from the fire, he has a book called Waco: A Survivor's Story. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's what the Paramount and Netflix docudrama was based on, partially. Gary Nosner, the FBI negotiator, he also wrote a book, and they merged the two books to make the series. But he's one of the nicest guys I've ever talked to. I've interviewed him, and I just think he is such a wonderful person, and it breaks my heart that they killed the woman that he loved. It's all very sad. I highly recommend that book or the Paramount series to anyone who wants to learn